Warning, this review will contain spoilers, and if you haven't seen the episode in the last 4 days and decide to go past this point, it's your own fault, so don't get mad at me. And yes, there was no episode last week. My apologies.
Yay!
Applejack judging a fashion contest? That's gonna be good, right? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Pones N Stuff. Since Suited for Success in Season 1, we've been quote-unquote blessed with quite a few Rarity-driven fashion episodes. Most of them aren't anything special, although Rarity Takes Manhattan from Season 4 is the lone standard-bearer of quality for the theme, so if Season 7 wanted to deliver an episode that is familiar of the pedestal it stood on, they had to ensure they did it right. What I'm saying is for Honest Apple to match up to its predecessor of high quality, it needed to be a rollercoaster of emotions that kept me on the edge of my seat. Unfortunately, because the synopsis read that Applejack was judging a fashion contest, I knew it was going to struggle from the first minute. However, you would be surprised in thinking it could actually rectify itself, but that synopsis, that main plot point, is something it failed to shake off for its entirety. I was overall happy with the premise of the fashion show's story, as it showcased Rarity's progression from wooing the interest of hoity-toity in Season 1 to working alongside him at a show of her own making, as well as the lovely balance of laugh-out-loud comedy and the show's dramatic tension. But why, oh why, in all that is holy, did Applejack have to be the one to judge a contest such as this? It's simple, because she causes a conflict by not knowing fashion at all and being as stubborn as a mule. No offense. This episode, even with other characters or Rarity at the helm herself, wouldn't have had enough to work with narrative-wise, especially when it came to a conflict. So by putting Applehorse in there with her belligerent and negative comments, we ended up getting a disequilibrium worthy of giving every character involved in the episode nightmares just so they were able to progress the plot forward. The thing is, based on continuity, Fluttershy would have been the better candidate. She showed sublime fashion knowledge, astute critical analysis, and the ability to almost single-handedly make Rarity's gala dress in Suited for Success in Season 1. So why didn't Rarity make the informed choice of Shy Animal Horse instead? It would have been great to see Fluttershy's assertiveness and personal growth in being able to criticize people out in the open, and not just that, the continuity would have been more than the subtle cues to other characters that we got in the episode by having her work with photo finish the pony she used to model for in Green Isn't Your Colour. That would have been a lovely episode with a lot of depth to tell. Unfortunately, however, we didn't get anywhere close to that, as the story we had was laboured with a character choice that stifled creativity and continuity, while ensuring that that same conflict that gave the episode a purpose was weighed down by it to where it feels unnecessary, bland, and inconsequential. Not just that, to have a three-way tie be the conclusion to it all made it feel like a waste of time considering the palaver that was built around her comprehensively awful judging. The story of this episode may have been decently paced and had a good tone and the outline for an interesting episode at heart, but it never escaped my wrath that the story felt half-assed and flat when it could have soared. And when you also think that we've basically got a cute version of The Simpsons' Judge Me Tender with Applejack replacing Moe, that's not endearing, it's a problem. With the story in bad state, the writing hit a very similar stumbling block by padding it out with too many character appearances of very little worth. We had the judges, the designers, and even minor appearances from Strawberry Sunshine, a character we've never seen before, Spike, and of course Apple Bloom as well. It just overwhelmed everything to where any good points that the writing had made for the characters we actually cared about in this got lost in the sea of minor appearances and, in the case of designers, stereotypes. All's well and good, right? Oh, good God almighty. Now, while I did appreciate Pinkie Pie and Photo Finish's comedic outlay, which was amazing for tonal contrast, Applejack's role, developing her own character, was satisfactorily done, while Rarity's just being her overdramatic self advanced the plot forward, and again created a conflict. It was fine, it was pleasant, and the voice acting wasn't too bad either, despite the fact that Lily Lace I'm sorry, I want to punch you in the face with a brick. The thing is, while the writing in the story didn't do too well, tripping up and falling over themselves, audibly and visually, this episode walked down the runway with very little issues. Musically, this episode was so full of variety and contrast that I just couldn't keep my ears away. While we had the usual harpsichord, country and disco music that would be expected from a Rarity, Applejack and Fashion People episode, each of the designers had their own subtle musical cues, which were new for me. We got an unexpected shredding guitar solo from Clothes Horse that made me laugh my arse off, and we had two lovely montages alongside free-flowing genre changes that happened on a dime. Also, we got an up-tempo chase scene to boot, and having all this on offer amazed me because it made me question why other episodes haven't tried to be so audibly eclectic without a musical number being present. And it was accompanied well by the animation, which, to be frank, started off quite slow, but by the time we finished, we had a lot to smile about, which included multiple creative transitions, character designs, those amazing facial expressions I love so much, the already noted montage sequences, and good use of camera and framing to make this episode, which mostly occurred inside Rarity's boutique, feel much more lively than you'd expect, despite the episode lacking an over-the-top set piece that it needed to get full marks. The message stood up quite well as Applejack's character grew in understanding her honesty isn't the best solution when being critical. It was a lovely one that reverberated throughout and seemed to be the major benefactor from Applejack's inclusion despite its problems. It resonated well in ensuring the audience at home learnt with her, reminding you that not only critiquing properly and correctly matters, but also that you need to respect other people's efforts when doing so. However, that does display a lack of middle ground between stating your opinion offensively, bluntly and effectively, and just praising for the sake of it, which seemed to happen to the designers in this episode. And seeing this episode, much like Spice Up Your Life, rely on a message and moral that constructive and reliable criticism is indeed key, the message's impact gets lost despite its best efforts, but that won't stop me from enjoying what it did to make the third act so enjoyable. It was good stuff. Going into this episode, I thought it was going to suck, because if you decide to put Applejack in charge of fashion, you're just asking for a disaster waiting to happen. Just look at what happened in Magical Mystery Cure if you do not believe me on that. However, through multiple viewings and analysis, I'm quite surprised that it did much better than anticipated, but sadly it was all down to a style over substance mentality as the music, animation and morals saved the day, papering over the cracks that the lackluster but well-balanced story and the writing created, meaning that we're left with an episode that comes away from this show and review looking like one of Friendship is Magic's better above average efforts, when it really isn't the case at all. It relied on a character partnership that's gotten quite tired and stale, had too many characters put in to pad it out, and had a shoehorned conflict that overshadowed its own potential, meaning that by the time it gets to its finish, all of the important core elements of the episode fell flat, much like Fluttershy Leans In a few weeks ago. But unlike its predecessor, this episode relied on its music and animation well to pull their weight and create something that was worthwhile in spite of its own problems. And unlike most Applejack episodes we've had, it was a fun and enjoyable one on its own merits, while making me want to strangle it for its failings. So calling it around average is right. It's not bad, but it's not superb either. It's a slice of life outing with enough going on to make you laugh and be happy, despite really not putting too much on the table to start with. Overall, Honest Apple scored a total of 15 out of 25, which is a C+, and I bet many of you didn't see that coming when this review started. In closing, you can see just how flawed my rating system can be that an episode of Style Over Substance managed to look so good coming out of a pretty poor story front. Then again, if you swap those around and have the story and writing help to make the message amazing while the visuals and music didn't pack a punch, it would still reach a similar rating. So it can happen both ways, so don't be too shocked that this managed to happen with an episode that many of you don't think is that good. Also, I do want to point out once again, I'm still bemused that Fluttershy wasn't included in this thing, knowing her past continuity, history, and character traits, but also, why wasn't Applejack arrested for kidnapping 5 people? And also, on top of that, why were the judges helping the contestants when they were going to be judged? It's a contest! You shouldn't be doing this. But then again, We are in a show, in a universe, where you can be forgiven for anything with a hug and a good ear to lean on, so I really should expect that to be a thing by now. And I'm wrong for thinking anything other than this childish, fun, friendship-loving universe is going to be unforgiving and punishing when it needs to be. Next week we have a royal-centric episode. It's long-awaited, and it should be a good one. I have been Freddie Thomas, you've been people watching. This has been another episode of Pones N Stuff for the CC Network. I will see you all next time.